he found red discoloration when he cut open into the back of his head towards the occipital bone, and he saw the red discoloration, and we actually saw the pictures of it. It's significant. You can't help but notice, why is this dark red here in the back of his head? And so he was important to note that. And he talked about the organs being removed, as is common, accompanied in the body cavity. And that when you have an autopsy, the organs are removed from the body and they are dissected and examined. And then they are put back in a bag within inside the body. So when they're buried, their remains will all be with them. But in this occasion, if there's going to be a second autopsy, then the organs are put in the body cavity so the second pathologist could be able to examine the organs as well.
I've done hundreds of autopsies on infants, toddlers, young teens, young adults, senior citizens, obese, morbidly obese, different ethnicities, suicides, murders, accidents, natural causes. I've done them all. So when you tell me there was an absence of the interior structure of the neck, my question is why and where is it? Was it recovered with the remains, or were the remains like this when you retrieve the remains? What part of his neck is missing? Has the soft tissue been preserved, or did the water damage or anything else disrupt what could possibly be used as information to find out the cause of death? Because if his neck is missing, then what caused his injury? The structural integrity of a neck, unless it was decapitated or dealt severe trauma, should be intact. So where's the portion of his neck? The interior, the inside of his neck is missing. Why? What can cause that type of damage to the neck and then the trauma to the back of the head? Did they strike him in the back of the head and stab him? Or did they shoot him in the neck? Right? And he falls back and he hits his head. In which case, in my humblest opinion, he was murdered.
3 weeks after Nolan Wells went into the water off Horn Island, there isn't one theory about what happened to him. There are 4, and as of this recording, none of them has been ruled out, and none of them has been confirmed. 2 autopsies, one still not fully released, the other explicitly inconclusive. An FBI presence that's never been fully explained. A sheriff who, when asked directly about the autopsy, redirected every question to a district attorney's office instead of answering himself. What's left, 3 weeks in, isn't a solved case or even a clear suspect. It's a set of possibilities, each resting on a different piece of evidence, each with a real gap that keeps it from closing the case, and a family still waiting to find out which one, if any, is right. You're watching Morbid True Crime, psychological true crime documentaries examining the decisions, evidence, and behavior behind real criminal cases.
Sheriff, can I ask you a quick question really quickly? Can I ask you a question? I'm Chantel with WDSU in New Orleans. I came up here 2 weeks ago to meet with you, but I think y'all were in and out of meetings about the Wells case, and then they told me eventually you just weren't able to come out. So that was like July 8th. So I'm back now. I'm wondering if you guys will be releasing any more details concerning the case. The last thing I saw on your social media was on July 8th, the same day. So any extra details, because we did just get the independent autopsy results today. Anything that you can give us?
Not at this time.
Okay, so y'all are no longer answering questions about the case?
Yeah. I know you're trying to get some edited footage, but
no, I'm just asking. I'm just confirming.
That's all we're saying. We're actively investigating.
Thank you. My name is Chantel. We're from New Orleans, WDSU News.
Hey, I'm Doug. Good night, Doug. Doug. Nice to meet y'all.
Okay. Yeah.
It's still actively being investigated.
Again, this was from the press conference this morning. When mom said that y'all were saying there was no foul play in the beginning, but now this, has anything changed since then at all, or?
Like I said, we're actively investigating the case. That's still an active, ongoing.
The state medical examiner did not release their report right at this time.
If I were you, I'd check with the district attorney's office too. As far as I know, you don't have to publish that. That's going through the district attorney's office. That's not. We don't do that. It's state medical examiner.
This has been the leading explanation since the first day of the search, and it remains the official working theory as of this recording. The setting supports it. Horn Island is federal land, roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, reachable only by boat. There are no shelters, no lifeguards, no restrooms, and no cell service once you're away from the shoreline. The currents around the island are known locally to be rough, and on the 4th of July, the beach was crowded. One volunteer searcher described dozens of boats and people who'd been drinking scattered along the shore that afternoon. The Jackson County coroner has told reporters his office routinely receives drowning victims recovered from Mississippi's barrier islands. This is not, geographically or historically, an unusual place for an accidental drowning to occur. The search itself, when it happened, moved at real scale. Once Wells was reported missing, the Coast Guard issued an urgent marine broadcast and sent a helicopter. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources and the National Park Service joined the search across the island and the surrounding water. 2 days later, a park ranger found his body off the island's northwestern tip. All of that is consistent with an accidental drowning. What complicates it is the person it happened to. Wells' parents and friends have consistently described him as a strong, capable swimmer. Someone who grew up around water and had made this same boat trip to Horn Island many times before. The independent forensic pathologist who examined his body, Dr. Roger Mitchell, noted that this detail carries real weight in these evaluations. When someone with strong swimming ability drowns, examiners typically look for a clearer account of how and where they entered the water, and often for some sign of a struggle. More than has been established here. Nobody has come forward describing seeing Wells go into distress in the water. Nobody has described seeing him swimming at all in the hours before he was reported missing. That absence doesn't rule out an accident. People drown quietly, without being seen, more often than television suggests. But it's the specific reason this working theory hasn't fully closed the case, even 3 weeks later. It's worth remembering, too, how ordinary the morning of July 4th looked before any of this began. A friend, Trace Carter, spoke with Wells before the group headed out that day. A small, forgettable exchange, the kind that happens before every trip like this one. Carter told him to watch out for himself. Wells told him he'd call when he got back. Nothing about that exchange suggested anything unusual was coming. Much of the online conversation around this case centers on what the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office retained before releasing Wells's body for the family's independent autopsy, specifically internal neck structures, including the trachea, the hyoid bone, and the thyroid cartilage. It's worth being precise and slow about what that retention does and doesn't indicate, because this is the detail that has driven the most speculation. Examiners commonly keep these structures during an active investigation, specifically so they can later confirm or rule out trauma to the airway. Retaining tissue is a standard forensic step taken to preserve the ability to answer a question. It is not, on its own, evidence that the question has already been answered in a particular direction. Dr. Mitchell's report listed several limitations he faced performing the independent autopsy on July 10th, 6 days after Wells disappeared and 4 days after his body was recovered. He didn't have access to the neck structures. He couldn't directly observe the lungs and airway for water or the stomach for gastric contents, both central to confirming or ruling out drowning specifically. Toxicology results hadn't been received yet. Given all of that, he wrote that the cause and manner of death were undetermined, pending further investigation, and that he could not rule out the possibility that non-accidental factors contributed to Wells' death.
And he talked about the organs being removed, as is common, accompanied in the body cavity. And that when you have an autopsy, the organs are removed from the body and they are dissected and examined. And then they are put back in a bag within inside the body. So when they're buried, their remains will all be with them. But in this occasion, if there's going to be a second autopsy, then the organs are put in the body cavity so the second pathologist could be able to examine the organs as well.
That sentence has circulated widely online, often stripped of its context. It is a statement about what remains unresolved, not a finding of what happened. No examiner, state or independent, has reported any physical evidence of assault, strangulation, or any specific act of violence against Wells. One specific forensic step worth understanding is diatom testing, examining tissue for microscopic algae that differ between fresh and salt water. Finding those particles deep in the body's system is one of the ways examiners can help confirm that a person was alive and breathing when they entered the water, rather than placed there afterward. It's not clear from public reporting whether this testing has been completed on Wells' remains. It's the kind of detail that would meaningfully narrow these four possibilities if and when the results are shared. The report also noted a focal area of red discoloration on the back of Wells's skull, in the occipital region, roughly the size described as 12 by 8 centimeters. Mitchell described this finding as inconclusive and meriting further investigation, not as an identified injury with a known cause. Marked decomposition had already set in by the time of the independent autopsy, which by itself can produce discoloration across the body that has nothing to do with trauma.
He found red discoloration when he cut open into the back of his head towards the occipital bone, and he saw the red discoloration, and we actually saw the pictures of it. It's significant. You can't help but notice, why is this dark red here in the back of his head? And so he was important to note that.
Whatever caused this specific mark, including the possibility that it's simply a product of 4 days in salt water, remains, at this point, genuinely unknown. What would actually resolve this particular question is toxicology and further review of the retained tissue by the state examiner's office. Neither has been completed as of this recording. Separate from the forensic questions is a behavioral one. What actually happened, hour by hour, between the afternoon Wells was last seen and the moment his absence registered as urgent to the people around him? The trip itself was large. By one friend's account, 20 to 30 people spread across 3 boats, all departing from the same dock and arriving at Horn Island together. That scale matters. It's a very different situation from a handful of friends noticing immediately that one person is missing, and it may partly explain why no single person raised an alarm earlier in the day. Wells was last confirmed, seen around 3 in the afternoon. His phone remained behind on the boat that returned to the mainland without him. According to Traceston Shepard, one of the friends present that day, leaving phones on the boat during these trips was ordinary practice for the group, not a deliberate act. He says Wells placed his own phone on the boat's dash along with roughly 15 others before getting into the water, an account corroborated on the record by his girlfriend and his uncle, who was piloting one of the boats that day. That night, a friend named Warren Hudson called Christine Wonsley, Wells's mother, at around 11 p.m. to tell her Wells was missing. After that call, Wonsley contacted another friend's family to ask if they'd seen him, and the family began tracking his phone through a location-sharing app. That's how she located the device, at the home of friends who'd been on the trip, and how, days later, she and her sister went through the phone themselves and found his Snapchat accounts completely empty, despite content on that platform typically remaining visible for 24 hours. She has described that detail as suspicious. No forensic examination has yet confirmed what, if anything, was deleted, or by whom. Separately, And independent of any of these accounts, investigators have confirmed a specific, documented timeline gap. Roughly 13 hours passed between an initial call for help placed to the Coast Guard around 11 that night and Jackson County's own official request for Coast Guard assistance made closer to noon the next day. That gap has not been publicly explained by investigators. It's worth holding two things at once here. The phone, the empty accounts, and the delayed reaction from the friend group have all drawn intense suspicion online. But at least part of that picture now has a mundane explanation on the record. Ordinary teenage behavior, a large and loosely organized group, an assumption that Wells was simply riding back with someone else. None of that explains the 13-hour gap in the official response, which remains the single hardest fact in this section to account for. One other circulating claim is worth correcting directly, since it illustrates how quickly this case's timeline has gotten tangled online. A photo alleged to show Wells at a land-based pool party in Jackson County in the early hours after he went missing was shown, according to Shepard, to actually be from a different gathering entirely, taken nearly a week earlier, in a different town, unrelated to Horn Island or July 4th at all. It's a reminder that not every piece of circulating evidence in this case has held up under a second look, and a caution against treating any single viral image or clip as settled fact before it's been checked. Whatever ultimately explains Wells's death, a second, better documented story has emerged in parallel about how the case itself has been handled. Sheriff John Ledbetter's early public statements described no foul play and a presumed drowning, based on what friends had told investigators at the time. In hindsight, even sympathetic observers have called that characterization premature, given how much remained unknown in those first hours. Weeks later, asked directly whether the FBI was now involved in the case, Ledbetter confirmed it, plainly. Asked about the autopsy specifically, he redirected, saying he'd been instructed by the district attorney that all further questions on the case should go through her office.
As District Attorney for the 19th Circuit Court District of Mississippi, I want to talk directly to the people of Jackson County. Our community is grieving the tremendous loss of Nolan Wells, who is loved and treasured by everyone. Nolan's family deserves answers, and our community deserves answers. Every death in the county, except those of natural causes and non-criminal car wrecks, are presented to your grand jury. Many people don't know that. We have handled death investigations in this manner my entire career. Nolan's case is being handled the same way, with the same care and the same commitment to the truth that we handle all death investigations. I understand the public's urgency to know what happened to Nolan, but we are not taking time for time's sake. We are taking the time required to complete the work this investigation demands. Since Nolan was reported missing, local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies have worked around the clock investigating what happened to him. Every piece of evidence must be examined. Every credible lead must be followed to its conclusion. Every witness interview must be analyzed in context of all other evidence. The pressure for answers does not change what the work requires. Our responsibility to Nolan and our community is to complete this investigation thoroughly, carefully, without compromise, supported by the evidence and worthy of the confidence of the people we serve. I also understand that many people have questions about why more information has not been released publicly. In Mississippi, the rules of professional conduct restrict the information a prosecutor can release during an investigation. Our restraint in communicating facts and evidence is not an effort to keep the truth from the public. It is an effort to protect the integrity of this investigation and the grand jury proceeding.
The Jackson County District Attorney's Office has since taken over handling of the case. The expected next step, standard procedure for an unresolved and unnatural death, is that findings will eventually be presented to a grand jury, a process step, not an indication that charges are imminent or even likely. As of this recording, roughly 60 witnesses have been interviewed, including in-depth interviews with the friends who were on the boat with Wells that day. The FBI's involvement has drawn particular attention, partly because Horn Island is federal land, which routinely brings federal agencies into cases like this one, regardless of whether a crime is suspected. FBI personnel are assisting with digital forensic examination, consistent with the ongoing questions about Wells's phone, and have separately opened a thread investigating death threats made against people connected to the case, including members of the friend group. The response beyond law enforcement has also escalated. The National NAACP has gone further than earlier statements of support, with its president publicly accusing investigators of being derelict in properly investigating the case, and the organization has passed a resolution urging deeper federal involvement.
Local officials seem not to hold people accountable. It's unfortunate when you see news reports saying law enforcement officials are repeating what individuals are saying as opposed to investigate the individuals who gave you the information, because you don't know who was involved or not involved. And so narrative matters in this case. And we're saying that in Nolan Wells' situation, the narrative should not be it was an accident before there was an investigation. The narrative should not be the words of individuals who went on a boat to the island with him, but they came without him, but with his cell phone, and you don't investigate those individuals. We're not accusing anyone of anything other than the state of Mississippi and local officials. We're accusing them of being derelict in their duties to follow up and to ensure that regardless of what happened, that there was a proper investigation so that this family and that community could be assured that if anyone was involved, they would be held accountable. And if it was truly an accident, that the families will have the necessary answers that any family deserved in this situation.
Mississippi Congressman Benny Thompson has separately called for a full, transparent, and timely investigation. And Ben Crump has continued pressing the case publicly, including at the NAACP's National Convention in Chicago, where the independent autopsy findings were first announced to a standing room crowd. Laid out together, here's what 3 weeks of investigation, 2 autopsies, and national attention have actually produced. An accidental drowning remains plausible given the setting. A remote island, rough currents, no supervision, but sits uneasily against Wells's known swimming ability and the absence of anyone who witnessed him struggling in the water. A trauma-related death cannot be ruled out by the evidence retained and examined so far, but nothing found to date by either examiner constitutes an actual finding of violence. The retained tissue exists to answer that question, not to presuppose the answer. A boat-related lapse in attention is well documented in its timeline gaps, particularly the 13-hour delay in requesting Coast Guard assistance, but is increasingly explained, at least in part, by ordinary, undramatic teenage behavior rather than concealment, and an institutional failure, not in what happened to Wells on the island, but in how thoroughly and transparently the case has been investigated and communicated since, is, at this point, the possibility with the most public, on-the-record support behind it, from the NAACP's own leadership to a sitting member of Congress. None of the 4 has been eliminated. None has been confirmed. There's a psychological dimension to this case that's easy to lose in the forensic detail. 3 weeks of unresolved uncertainty doesn't just sit quietly with the people closest to it. It presses on them. Wells's friends, including those who've spoken publicly, have described receiving death threats since his body was found. His mother has described going through his phone herself, checking his social media accounts personally, because waiting on official answers had become unbearable. A reward, now over $100,000, sits on the table for anyone with information, announced the same week the family buried him. None of that is standard for a case investigators still describe as an accidental drowning. And yet nothing gathered so far actually proves it's anything else. That gap between how large this case has grown and how little has actually been confirmed is in its own way the most consistent thread running through all 4 possibilities. It would be easier, in almost every sense, if this case had one clear explanation by now. It doesn't. What exists instead is a family still waiting on toxicology results, an investigation that's shifted from local hands to a district attorney's office and a federal agency, and a set of possibilities that all remain technically still on the table. That uncertainty isn't a failure of reporting, it's the actual, current state of the evidence. Whatever eventually closes this case, it hasn't happened yet. And treating any one of these four possibilities as settled in either direction before the evidence supports it would be its own kind of dishonesty. Nolan Wells deserves better than a story rushed to its ending. So for now, does everyone still waiting to find out how it actually ends? Thank you for watching Morbid True Crime. Subscribe for more documentary investigations examining the psychology and evidence behind real criminal cases. This case remains active. We'll follow up as confirmed developments emerge.